We have a test next Friday, correct. So exam number 2 is next Friday on your syllabus as planned. So make sure you're keeping up with your homework and checking online for that. So it's coming right up. All right, any other questions? Boy, it looks pretty light. I'm doing well, thank you. Let's see, quiz today, it looks like. It looks a little light in here. So, quiz question today is, what is your name? What is your name?
We have to write the question.
You got 30 seconds. You do not need to write the question, but you do need to put your name on your test as well. All right, 30 seconds. Let's go. A little extra credit for you today. Apparently there's some sort of draw. Could be the weather. I don't know what it is. It's pretty beautiful out. It is too nice. Is that right? Yeah. Well, it's supposed to get up to 80 today. So. All right, pass them up.
You want me to write it again?
Need all of them in 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, and 0, just in the nick of time. Okay, so we left off working on some money. Money, and the banking system. And we learned a little bit about the Federal Reserve Bank, our banker's bank. So we have some tools, functions of the Fed. I'm going to start off with some tools of the Fed today. Tools of the Fed. So all of these tools, there's 3 tools that they use to control the supply of money. Now money, remember, is more than just currency. It's those banking accounts, checking and savings primarily. All of the accounts in the nation plus currency make up what we call the money supply. And that's an important feature that we went over last time because there's not enough currency for everybody to get their money all at one time. So the banking system is a little bit of a leverage concept where you put your money on deposit at the bank in your checking or savings account, and if everybody went to the bank at the same time, there's not enough there. And that was one of the reasons banks tended to fail early on until the establishment of the Federal Reserve Bank in 1913. So how does the Fed control the money supply? So these are what these tools are about. Number 1, it sets what's called the discount rate. The discount rate. So the discount rate is the interest rate, the interest rate charged to member banks for short-term loans. The interest rate charged to member banks or institutions, to member banks for short-term loans. So, this is the only interest rate that the government sets. The Federal Reserve sets, anyway. This is the only one that they set. So you're often misled by the media where they say, oh, the Federal Reserve raised interest rate or lowered the interest rates or something like that. All those interest rates that we normally deal with, even down to your interest rate on certificates of deposit or your lowly savings account interest rate we talked about last time, the rate you pay on your car loan, the rate you pay for a home mortgage, all of those rates are set by the marketplace through what we saw in the previous chapter of the demand and supply of loanable funds. People who want to borrow money, people who want to loan money. They get together and the price of borrowed money is the interest rate. That's the amount you're going to have to pay back. So if you're getting paying a 10% interest rate and you borrow $1,000, you're going to pay $100 for the use of that money over the time you didn't pay it back, right? So the interest rate truly is a payment for borrowed funds. So the only interest rate that the government sets is this one. And this is what that interest rate is, the interest rate charged to member banks for short-term loans. Why are they making loans? Well, they might be in trouble, although the Fed has gone away from this. So some reasons the bank may be short on required reserves. Big RR. We talked about required reserves last time. What was that? Dig back in your notes. The bank may be short on required reserves. What were required reserves? Yeah, that they have to hold back, that they can't loan out, right? So our fractional reserve system is set up that they can't loan out 100% of your money. They can only loan out a fraction of it. So whatever that fraction is, if they're required to hold back 10%, and then a whole bunch of people come and make some withdrawals that day, they could come up short on what's required of them by the Fed. In that case, especially if it's just kind of a short-term hiccup, they can go to the Federal Reserve and say, hey, give me a loan. Was that a ring? It was so subtle, I guess I'm going to let that one fly. They can say, hey, how about if I just borrow the funds? I think we'll be fine tomorrow. We'll get some more money in. But for tonight, we're short. We're screwed without a loan from the Fed. So the Fed's going to charge them money to essentially loan them for a very short time. Could be 3 days, could be even one night. A very short-term loan. So that is the only interest rate under the direct discretion of the Federal Reserve. All other stuff that we'll get to in a moment tends to influence the market rates. It's not set like it's going to be 1%, it's going to be 1.5, but rather it's influenced. Okay, so that's our first tool. Questions on that one? The discount rate. Number 2 is tied into our first bullet point. They set the required reserve ratio. So they set the required reserve ratio. That is the fraction that needs to be held back. I called it little RRR last time. We did a short little equation. Some amount of deposits have to be held back. If it's 10%, it's 10%. If it's 11%, then there's a little bit more that can't be loaned out. We'll see the impact of that here in a little bit. So they set the required reserve ratio. And then the last tool is the one that's used the most frequently. And that is open market operations. Open market operations. And what the Fed's doing here is either buying or selling bonds in the open market. So they are going into the marketplace and purchasing bonds, typically government bonds. We'll talk about bonds here in a second. So this is the purchase or sale of bonds in the, let's just put quotes here, free market, meaning just private individuals can buy and sell bonds. All right, anybody want to throw out a definition for a bond? What's a bond? Corporate bonds, you've maybe heard the word. Bail bonds might work for you. Hopefully you guys don't have too much direct experience with that, but what's a bond? It's an IOU. Okay, so just a piece of paper. It's really a loan agreement between two different parties. So what's a bond? A bond is an IOU in short. A bond is an IOU. So how bonds work, the classic thing that the Federal Reserve typically buys and sells are government bonds. So one of the ways that they finance or fund or borrow when they don't have enough taxes to cover government spending, what did we call that situation? A deficit. So when T is less than G, we've gone over this a few different times in different ways, they have to borrow. How do they borrow? They offer an IOU. So a government bond is simply a piece of paper that says, I owe you $10 million, let's say. So this is called the face value of the bond. And then we put love Obama. Some sort of official signature on there, right? So Obama gets 10 million so that they can go buy new weapons of mass destruction or other spending as they see fit. And the person now is holding this piece of paper. That's really good. Government's never defaulted on these things yet. We know that they're in some trouble now, but it doesn't seem like any trouble we can't work through. So this is really good, valuable. In other words, the person holding this piece of paper is very, 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 very likely to be paid back. Unlike maybe a corporate bond, where maybe a company issues a bond and they're kind of a shaky company, the interest rate's real nice, but if that company goes under, you're not getting paid back, right? So this type of IOU is very, very safe historically. Just for simplicity of the numbers, I'm going to say a 10% interest rate, which is way high. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to even put interest. We're going to impute the interest. Hold on a sec. Don't write that down, or if you did, cross it off. I'm going to put on here a $1 million payment worth of interest. So this is called now a coupon payment. It's effectively the interest, which would represent about 10% if we worked it backwards. And I'll get over the reason why it's done this way in a moment. So we got a $10 million principal amount that was borrowed by the government. Somebody's going to get $1 million every year for, let's say, 5 years. And so the 5 years, this is the term of the bond. The term to maturity, or the length of time. And that 5 years, of course, would have a date. So I'm doing a few things here in simplicity. All right, so the interest rate, the bond interest rate, if we take that first year's coupon payment and divide it by the amount that was lended to the government of 10 million, the face value, we get 1 million over 10 million gives us our 10% rate of return. All right, so I want to pause for a second and remind you that this transaction went on between Obama and, let's say, some private citizen. So let's say, I'm sorry, give me your name again.
Taylor.
Taylor. So Taylor's sitting there holding on to that little piece of paper that we have. And she's free to trade it. So she could go out and sell that now. And if she's selling it 3 years later, and the economy tanked, and the current rate of interest is now only a lowly 1%, is the thing she's holding more valuable or less valuable? Remember that the thing she's holding, that Taylor's got, promises $1 million payment and $10 million at the end of it. If current market rates 2 years later, because of the economy tanking, are only 1%, in other words, some other investor, the best they can get is 1%, is what Taylor's holding more valuable or less? More. So you're going to get $1 million on 10 million, effectively a 10% rate, if you buy that from her. So that just raised today's value for it. So she's free to go and sell that in the market. So why don't Taylor sell it to Taylor? And some money's exchanged. They just go about their business. Taylor to Rianne. I just got to get this visual going here. So, okay, so government bonds are traded on the open market. By the way, China could be buying that thing. That's where we get into international issues and international borrowing. Anybody in the world can buy that thing. It's out on the marketplace. All right, so the Federal Reserve, back to our story here, has a tool to affect the money supply. And so what the Federal Reserve can do, they make this stuff. Right? They have some of this stuff. And so it now can step into the economy. You guys are the economy. I'm Ben Bernanke, chairman of the Federal Reserve. I'm going to go jump into your marketplace where this was being traded on Wall Street somewhere, and I'm going to buy it. What happened to the supply of money in the United States? It went up, right? Now, when Rianne and I should have maybe left this visual, when you guys were trading it with each other, it was simply bond for money, money for bond, bond for money, money for bond, right? There was no increase or decrease in the money supply. It was just held by, the wealth was held by a different person in a different way. But as soon as the Fed came into the system, the money supply went up. And now there's more money, and the Fed is holding this bond, which takes it out of circulation. Okay? That would be an open market purchase of a bond. If the Fed's holding the bond, they can jump back into the market and decrease the money supply by simply selling it. Somebody out there is willing to buy it. There's a price to be paid. The Fed just took money out of the system. Now the Federal Reserve is holding the money. So this is something that the Federal Reserve does daily. This is the most active tool that's used to alter the supply of money in the United States. All right, let me write a little bit of that down now. I do want to make my comment here on the interest rate deal. So let's put a little bullet underneath this. If 2 years into the term, a person wants to sell, this bond will sell at a premium, is the words we use in the financial world. So this bond is going to sell at a premium because it's pretty valuable with interest rates being down. I'll add a little more detail here. If 2 years into the term, a person wants to sell this bond, wants to sell, period, this bond will sell at a premium if current rates, if current market rates are lower than 10%, which is the amount that the bond is producing. And what's going to happen here is an important relationship between interest rates and prices of bonds. So we can, the price, let's call this the market price. The market price of the bond, let's call it PB, the price of the bond, will be higher. And I just want to show you kind of the connection back to what we did here to calculate the interest rate. The face value, or the value of the bond, is what we're going to be computing now. So if you think about the effective rate is equal to the coupon payment, which stays fixed, divided by the price of the bond. Same calculation here, bear in mind, but again, we're 2 years into the future, and the situation's changed. The effective rate is really the market-driven rate. And so if we rearrange this little algebra, this little ratio, and put this guy up here and this guy down here, we start to uncover an important principle with bonds. The inverse relationship between interest rates and the price of a bond. So I'm going to just put PB over here, and if I take my coupon payment and divided it by my interest rate, and let me just put our little I that we used before, the nominal rate of interest. It's the rate that the bank was paying you. It's that little I. Remember the Fisher formula that you should know for the next test here was that the nominal rate minus the inflation rate equals the real rate of interest. That little guy here, this is what the bank is telling you they'll pay you, or the GM is paying you on the bond, or the government's saying. That's what little I is. And the math tells us if this goes up, if interest rates go up, the thing in the denominator goes up, the overall expression goes down. Has to work that way. And so that is the inverse relationship between the price of the bond and interest rates. If you take other business classes, we're not going to get into details on that, but if you take other business classes, you may have heard that. You might even hear it in the news media about the price of bonds and interest rates. That has to hold. Okay. So let's see. Last bullet. This is kind of being a long bullet. So let's put key point here. This is what you really need to know in terms of the money supply. Key point. An open market sale of a bond leads to an increase or decrease in the money supply. Open market sale. Decrease. Good. All right. So come back to this visual on the test or on your homework. I'm the Fed. Let's just start with the money. Who's got the money? Who's got the bond? You guys are the economy. If I go out now and buy the bond, money supply goes up. If I sell the bond, money supply goes down. So remember that visual, and that'll hopefully help you on some problems. So an open market sale led to, what was it again, an increase or decrease in the money supply? Decrease in the money supply. So when we use the word money supply, we're talking about M1 or M2, one of these measures that we defined last time. So for instance, M2, there's less of that out there with an open market sale. An open market purchase leads to an increase in the money supply. Well, we got a little bit of a feel for these tools. I don't want to leave our numbers here without thinking about the direction here. If the Fed lowers the discount rate, will that tend to increase or decrease the money supply? A lowering of the interest rate, would that encourage money or discourage money? Encourage, right? So a decrease in the discount rate leads to an increase in the money supply, and vice versa. The required reserve ratio. If the Fed increases the required reserve ratio from 10% to 20%, will that increase or decrease the money supply? Decrease it, right? So they're more of the money is held back and not loaned out. So an increase in the required reserve ratio would lead to a decrease in the money supply. All right, so these are the tools that we have, that the Fed has to alter the supply of money. All right, I want to really nail down how money's created. I pulled out the old printing press last time, so we know that we can run the printing press. That turns out not to be a very good idea for governments to do. The easier way is through loans. How did a bank make money? How does a bank make money? What was the key thing that the bank does to make money as a business? Charge interest, and there was a little level more of detail there. The interest they charge has to be higher than the interest they pay, right? So they have deposits that they're paying people a little bit. And what did I call that? The difference between what they're charging and what they're paying out. The spread. So there has to be a spread for them to make some money. So let's go over kind of a fun example, I think. Suppose you find $10,000 buried in your backyard. So it's in some old can or some shoebox, wherever your mind wants to take this. 10,000 bucks, cold hard cash. Happy days. What do you do with this money? Invest, okay? That sounds very prudent. Is everybody going to go invest it?
Go blow it.
Go blow it? So we got blow and invest. Okay, we could start to think of a few things we could spend some money on. Now, what would be those of you who are in my business ethics class, I might push on you a little bit here. What, if you find 10,000 bucks in the backyard, maybe what should you really do first? Yeah, maybe find out, check for go report it to the police. Oh, I don't see too many people nodding their heads like this. All right, so let's say that you did the right thing. You report it to the police, and they go through their statutory amount of time of 30 days or whatever it is, and they say, nope, we can't find the rightful owner. It's you. Finders keepers, you got it. So we're back to glory days here. Invest, blow, whatever you want. You got your 10,000 bucks. So let's say that you're not quite sure what you want to do with the money, so you put it into your account. So suppose you find 10,000 buried in your backyard and deposit it into your account at Shelby. Where do you want to put your money? Let's put you in the driver's seat here with your prudent investing. Where's your bank account? Give me a bank, any bank, or your bank. I don't care. With what? At. E-T? E-N-T-N. E-N-T-N. Okay, I haven't heard that one. All right. At end. Oh, E-N-T. Okay. Thought I heard a little N there. Ent Bank. Is that like for Enterprise Bank or short? Okay, Ent Bank. Got it. So suppose you find 10,000 and deposit in your account at Ent Bank. And the required reserve ratio is 20%. or 0.2, a fraction, but let's just say, you can make sure you go both ways with this, right? 20% or 0.2. All right. So Ent Bank gets a nice little deposit. So we get 10,000. And on deposit, Ent Bank has required reserves of how much? 2,000. And that leaves some excess. And what does Ent Bank do if they're going to make some money? Loan it out. So we call this extra amount excess reserves. So we got required reserves, and then whatever's left over is kind of excess that's available to be loaned out. Excess reserves of 8,000. Okay. At this point, has the money supply changed? No. What is the money supply? If this is Shelby's checking account, what's in M1? What's the components of M1? Just in general. Checking accounts, good. And what else? Currency in circulation, good. I'll just put currency. So what happened here is we found 10,000 bucks and we transformed it into a checking account, so the money supply is the same. Now, let's see, Blake, what would you like to do with 8,000 bucks if you had it? Blow it on what? We're going to be more specific now. 8,000 bucks. Some guns. All right. So let's buy some guns. Maybe a gun cabinet or something too, right? So you're going to outfit yourself with some guns. Unfortunately, Blake doesn't have the dough for that. But he runs over to Ent Bank, and Ent Bank says, hey, we got a special today, $8,000 available. And so they're going to loan that out. Now, once you get the money in your hands from the bank, you go run to, let's say, Cabela's, right? And where does the money go from there? Back into circulation, right? So Cabela's has it. What does Cabela's do with it at the end of the day, assuming Blake came in with cash or currency or what? It doesn't really matter. What does Cabela's do with their cash register at the end of the night? They run to the bank. All right, so now we're starting to see the link here. So this $8,000 turns into a Cabela's deposit. All right, so we started off with Shelby up here putting 10,000 in. Now we've got Cabela's putting it in 8,000. Now Cabela's banks at Wells Fargo. And so what does Wells have to hold back from this? $1,600. So Wells Fargo has a deposit on with Cabela's at 8, has $1,600 that's required to be held back, leaving some excess reserves of how much? $6,400. All right. Sal is car shopping and just so happens to be needing about $6,400. Sal, where are you going to do your car shopping at? Where's your favorite car lot? What is it? Craigslist. All right. But where you found a dealer, what's its name? What are you visualizing? I want you to come up to the, you've got Craigslist, you're searching on the internet. What does it say on that banner right there? Where is this car at? Bob's Ford. Bob's Ford. Hey, we got Bob's Ford. Bob's Ford's got a special. What kind of car are you driving? I'll probably find a F-150. F-150 truck. Got it. All right, so Bob Ford entertains Sal's offer. They come to terms at $6,400. Sal drives away in his new F-150, and Bob's Ford now deposits his money back into People's Bank here in Ottawa. And so now we've got $6,400 sitting on account at People's Bank. All right, so then People's has to hold back $1,280, and so on, and so on, and so on. Does Shelby have rights to her money at any point in time? Yes. Does Cabela's have rights to their money at any point in time? Yes. Bob's Ford? Yes. This is what creates money. Loans, the banking system, through the process of loaning out money, creates more money. So by putting it on account, there was something very powerful that happened right here when the $10,000 left the form of hard cash in Shelby's hands and went to her Ent Bank, right? Once it did that, it's transformed into more money through this loaning process. 10,000 plus 8,000 plus 6,400 plus we get an Excel spreadsheet and we could fill the whole page down to about infinity. And so we can think about the total change to the money supply. Now we got to be careful with this. The total change to the money supply was not affected by this first maneuver, right? The money supply didn't change when Shelby deposited it here. It stayed even. But the increase in the money supply kicked off with this first loan. That first loan of $8,000 that ultimately ended up in Cabela's bank account gave us the first one. So $8,000 plus $1,600, oops, not $1,600, $6,400 plus ... And that continues on. All right, so we're going to use this little symbol here for the change to the money supply. Some mathematician, I can't remember exactly who to give credit to, came up with a shortcut method to get exactly how much that amount is. And it turns out to be relatively simple, as some of the great mathematical things are. Complexity brought into simplicity. If you take 1 over the required reserve ratio and multiply that times the initial change in excess reserves, you quickly find the answer to that little problem. So the change in the money supply is 1 over 0.2. We don't want to put the percent in for this particular thing. Times the initial change in excess reserves that happened, which was the 8,000. Gives us what? Who's seeing that? Pull out a calculator if you need to. 1 over 2/10 is 5. So this little thing here turns into a 5. 1 over 2/10 times 8,000 gives you 40,000. That multiplier of 5 is called the deposit multiplier. So I'm kind of running out of room here, but I'm going to rewrite what I got there. The change in the money supply, you guys can just continue on with your paper here. 5 times the 8,000. This is called the deposit multiplier. The deposit multiplier. And I want you to be very clear when you write this down. This shows the maximum change to the money supply. So this shows the maximum, underline maximum, shows the maximum change to the money supply from a change in excess reserves. Going back to this list, make sure you're all caught up there. What would cause that multiplying process to be smaller, to get actually a smaller change? That's why I wanted to emphasize the word maximum. What in this chain of events that I took the time to walk you through, what could happen that would cause the change in the money supply to be smaller? And in fact, we'd expect it to be smaller. The RR could change, yes, but we're going to hold that constant. But that is one of the tools of the Fed. They don't loan out all the money. So the bank could choose to not loan out all the money. Let's write that one down. That's one way. And then there's one more you can keep hunting for while I get that on the board. So let's just put will not be max if one, bank does not loan out all excess reserves. And we now can think about a desired reserve ratio. So if it's desired reserves exceed, or are, I'm sorry, not exceed, are lower, or no, exceed, sorry, exceed required reserves, the multiplier will be less. More simply put, the bank just doesn't loan out all that they could. That was one of two ways that we won't get the max. What's the other way?
What if the person who made the deposit spends?
Yeah. If they, did you say spend?
Or take it out?
If they hold it in the form of cash, that's the part. If they take it out of the process, essentially, right? So imagine if we started this off and Shelby said, you know, I'm all about investing, but once she came to her senses, she's like, I got to blow some too. So she deposits $9,000 and keeps 10 large $100 bills in her purse just to feel good about life for a little bit, right? Holding cash sometimes is powerful. Then you can see that the process will all be reduced, right? And the same thing is true here if Sal was able to negotiate $6,000 and kept the $400 in his pocket, right? So we all tend to hold on to some cash potentially along the way. That will cause the multiplier to be less as well. So the second part here is if people choose to hold cash. Instead of depositing it all. Instead of depositing it all. Okay, these are called currency drains. So 1 and 2 are called currency drains. And both lead to the real world multiplier both lead to the real world multiplier being less than the deposit multiplier. All right. I think we should end early. Look at your watches. Note, it happens once in a while. Such a beautiful day. We'll call it a day. I know it's not a lot, but it's a little gift for me, from me to you.